The Deadliest Civil Warrior. Each week, we invite a historical analyst of the American Civil War era to discuss the outcomes of the war based on history, facts, and stats. Last week, we covered the subject of African Americans and whether the Civil War was a direct battle over slavery or not. This week, we will analyze the advantages and disadvantages of the northern and southern regions of the United States and evaluate the advantages that caused the Northerners to defeat the South. Players today include the motivated Confederate Army and the valiant Union military battling it out to determine which 19th century army truly had the greatest advantage in the Civil War. Each round, we will analyze the political, social, economic, and military assets before simulating these in the final round, which will determine our winner. Welcome to this week's episode of The Deadliest Civil Warrior.
Our two opponents are the Confederate Army, represented by General Robert E. Lee, and the Union Army, led by General Ulysses S. Grant. These deadly dudes are going to compete to be the champion of the deadliest civil warrior.
Today we will analyze the Civil War's deadliest civil warriors under the two generals, based on the advantages and disadvantages faced by the Union and the Confederacy.
Welcome to Round 1, competitors. We are pleased to have Miss Janie Moore, an expert on Northern military tactics, join us today. She has trained in the U.S. Navy for 13 years, and through her experiences, she has grown fond and knowledgeable of the Union's great general, Ulysses S. Grant. Janie, what advantages and disadvantages did the North experience politically?
Politically, the North had an extreme advantage. The United States capital, Washington, D.C., was located in the North. The President of the United States and Union, Abraham Lincoln, was a game maker whose calculated moves proved very beneficial for the North.
Thank you, Janie. Next we have Miss Cameron Dwan, a redneck from Mississippi and a specialist on tactics relating to the Confederacy. She believes that Robert E. Lee was one of the most influential military members. Cameron, what advantages and disadvantages did the North experience politically?
Don't you mean the South, honey? It's fine. Although the capital was in the north, it was situated in a border state near the south, making it available for invasion. The South had a more qualified president in Jefferson Davis. He had a plethora of experience in U.S. Congress, while Lincoln only had a little political experience. And by the way, your shoes are so 7 years ago.
The South lacked a strong central government. They also relied on foreign affairs for support. Confederates hoped European demand for its cotton would bring recognition and financial aid. Like other rebel movements in history, the Confederates counted on the outside help to be successful.
Now for a brief commercial break.
Because y'all will not support our war effort and want to remain neutral, we have decided to place an embargo on all cotton trade, so you will suffer.
How are we going to make our clothes?
You help us and we will give you cotton for clothes.
We are in desperate need.
Same.
Here we are in round 2, competitors. The social aspect of the war was extremely important. What advantages and disadvantages did the North and South encounter?
The North had a much larger population compared to the South, 21 million people in the North as opposed to a mere 9 million people in the South. This increased the number of soldiers enlisted in the Army, giving the North a greater advantage. In the South, more than a third of the 9 million citizens were slaves, who were not allowed to fight until 1863, halfway through the war.
Oh, so this gigantic gap in the sizes of the military proved to be a huge component in the victory of the North.
Exactly.
Let me tell you, though, the Confederacy also had a huge social advantage that made up for this southern weakness. The Confederates fought a very defensive war, as most of the war was fought on southern soil. This caused citizens of the seceded South to feel directly affected by the war. The feeling of personal targeting brought on an emotional aspect in the Southerners' battle as it boosted the Army's morale. The sentimental attachment in the fighting was definitely a missing element among the Union, but one of the most damaging disadvantages was that the North was faced with the location of the battles.
As Cameron mentioned, most of the war was fought in the South. Therefore, the Union's military was unfamiliar with the terrain and the climate of the region.
Oh, so because the Confederacy was so familiar with the southern landscape and climate, that became a huge advantage for the South.
Correct, miss.
Alright, thank you, analysts.
Who doesn't love money? Unfortunately, you cannot print out money uncontrollably, or your country will experience inflation. This was one of the newly seceded South downfalls because they were new, inexperienced government. Cameron, Janie, care to explain the further details on the economic advantages and disadvantages in the North and the South?
You are exactly right, Snigda. The South suffered greatly from inflation. Furthermore, they were short on money from the start and had few factories to produce weapons, railroad tracks, and other supplies.
In the North?
In the North, there were many people to grow food and to work in factories making supplies. The territory of the North was booming, with 85% of the factories, 70% of the railroads, and 65% of the farmland. They had a more established government with knowledgeable leaders to assist in keeping the economy stable despite the added demand for money to support the war cause.
So ultimately, a military wins a war. Analysts, please discuss the advantages and the disadvantages that the Union and Confederate armies encountered.
The North benefited from a strong navy and large fleet of private trading ships. However, the vastness of the South required them to conquer an area comparable to the size of Europe. General Grant was an asset to the Union Army, and his victory at Vicksburg officially started the Anaconda Plan, developed by General Scott. He wrote, "The art of war is simple enough. Find out where your enemy is. Get at him as soon as you can. Strike him as hard as you can and keep moving on." Lincoln supported his military strategies of blunt fighting in order to achieve a speedy victory.
And the Confederate army?
The South benefited from having experienced, well-trained generals. Many attended the prestigious military school of West Point. Therefore, a majority of military soldiers led the South, and that contributed to the size of the army, which was equivalent to that of the North.
Alright, thank you, analysts.
Now for a brief commercial break.
Hey y'all, welcome to Georgia. This here be my cotton field. Do you miss getting new cotton clothes? Y'all should buy some cotton from us. You get some cotton, you get some cotton, we all get some cotton.
I'm sorry, but we need to talk.
What's wrong? Don't y'all want to buy our cotton? We want you to get our cotton and support our war effort.
Right, about that. We don't need you anymore. It's not you, us. We found someone else.
What? But you said my cotton was the best.
I know. I'm sorry. I just think we need to stop. India, they make some great cotton too.
But you promised. I needed you. I thought you'd always be here for me.
I never loved your cotton. Here we are at the final round of the competition. After this round, we will declare the undisputed champion of the Deadliest Civil War warrior. Let's now watch a reenactment illustrating how the North and the South reacted to the various advantages and disadvantages they faced.
The penguins represent the North, and the hamster represents the South. There were 3 times as many Northerners as Southerners.
The Southern government was much more new and therefore is represented by a baby and has only changed because they didn't have as much money. The Northern government was way more experienced and had more money, represented by the $5 bill.
Starting in 1861, the North and the South battled. In 1863, the North added slaves to their military. The South followed. They battled for 2 more years before the North won.
And the winner is the Union!
They had numerous advantages, including a larger population, the support of a navy, a well-established central government, and a vast majority of factories, railroads, and farmland. Congrats!
Alright, that's it for this week on the Deadliest Warriors. Be sure to stop by next week.
And remember, never take a victory for granted.